Let's start a basic example that allows us to explore the plugin as well as the API, because really the vCenter plugin is just integrating with the public API. As we do this, let's look at getting a list of all data stores that are presented to our ESXi hosts. Now remember that vCenter Orchestrator can be plugged into multiple vCenters, and as such, when we do this command, we're going to get a list of all data stores on all ESXi hosts across all vCenters that are plugged into the Orchestrator instance. Something to keep in mind. So as we go down over here, we have a little magnifying glass. This allows us to search the APIs that are presented to Orchestrator at this time, either via plugin or via third-party setup. So we're going to search for it. I know that I'm looking for get all data store. I could just search for data store. I could search for all kinds of things. But the one that I want is I want to get all data stores right here. That's part of the vCenter plugin. See how it gives get all data stores. Now remember, these are calls, and these calls should be case sensitive. So I'm going to go to that selection and close. And over here you can see I have a method. Remember, method outputs an object of attributes, or a list of information about data stores. So there's some parameters that we can pass to it, and a returns type is an array of VC data store. So it's going to return to us an array of the object VC data store. Now if I want to know what that object VC data store has in it, I can click it, and we see that this is actually an attribute, and it gives us some details. Now all this is on their public API on the vCenter. You can click the external documentation and it'll take you to the public API, which is a little bit more up to date than the Orchestrator one. And you can see that I can expand VC data store and see the attributes that are associated with it. I'm going to scroll down a little bit and I want to click on name. Well, this is the name of the data store. That's what comes out when I do that. There's things like ID, and then there's some interesting things that come out of this as I go down this. Notice this particular object, known as config status, has a return type of VC managed entity status. So its return type, if I access this, is actually another method or another set or object of attributes. I can use the back button to scroll back to what I had selected previously and go back to where I was so that we can just look at the one we care about, which is the get all data stores. I'm going to go ahead and call this, and we'll see if we can get it set up here. I'm going to make a couple windows so you don't run into that anymore. So I'm going to create a variable with the term var, call it data stores, and now we are going to go VC plugin. As you can see, I've duplicated the term that is here, and I've got it all. Remember, that was the term that came in here. VC plugin dot get all data stores bracket bracket, and then there's optional parameters which I'm choosing not to pull. This should create an object of attributes on data stores. So I'm going to go ahead and log that out. We're going to get rid of our previous log message because it's not helpful anymore. And we're going to exit, and let's attempt to run this and see what we get. As you can see, my output is a object of attributes. Not very human readable. It does actually say the name right there and right there of the two different data stores, but it's not really what I was hoping for when I did this. So let's explore what happened. One thing that is important to note as you do this is you can actually see what type of object it is. It returned a object VC data store. So now that we know what kind of object we've got, which aligns that it was supposed to return an array of VC data stores, so we can click that, and let's take a look at some of the attributes we might care about. Well, I'd like to know what host that data store is on. That might be useful. I could get that, but that creates another array of data stores. So for right now, let's just go with name. See how we have that right there? So we're going to go back to our scriptable task, but we do have a problem. We have an array of data stores that means that we have multiple data stores with a bunch of attributes associated with them. And this can cause a lot of problems because we're never going to get a clean answer back of it. So we need to iterate through the array. So I'm going to use a basic JavaScript for each loop to be able to iterate through the elements in the array in order to get the information that we want. So we're going to do for each, create a new variable to store each iterate run through. And then something we want it to do. So we're going to system.log. Notice how I'm referencing the individual object, data store now, which holds a single object of data store, one at a time as they iterate through the array. And I'm going to select the name parameter that I have selected over here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this because it doesn't need it anymore. We're going to save this or exit, and then we're going to go ahead and run this real quick. Notice how I just got a validation error. It doesn't like something that I did. There's something wrong in the process. So now we're going to take a look at the object and see what I did wrong. It doesn't like this, and that's because I didn't complete my information there. Notice where it's saying the error is, see the little red line, but where the real problem is that I didn't properly complete my information because semicolon should be the end of all executed lines in JavaScript. Okay, let's exit out and try it now and see how that works. We now have the names of the data stores. Now that's very useful, but there is a little bit of a problem. It isn't completely usable right off the top of our thing. For example, let's take a look at, I want to generate maybe the capacity of each data store. So let's go through that particular exercise. Now sometimes you have to dig around to find what you're looking for. It's not always easily available. In the case of capacity, we know that we have a data store, but there isn't any listing here that seems like capacity off the top of my head. I can look through them all, I can try to find them all, but it's just not there. But what is there's something called summary. And summary creates a VC data store summary object type for this particular object. So we click down summary and expand it. We will see that it has a whole bunch more information. One of the options there is capacity. And as it reads here, it's going to output in bytes the maximum capacity of the data store. So let's iterate through this together. So we are now going to create another piece of information called capacity, and we know that it is data store.summary. Watch your case sensitivity on this because it'll get you every time. And your spelling, if you're like me, you got to watch that too. Okay, we're going to go ahead and run it real quick and see what happens. Now, again, my size in bytes probably not the most useful thing for me because it's huge, right? So I'm going to now do something a little bit more advanced. I'm going to create a function inside of my scriptable task, and this function's job is to convert from bytes into gigabytes, something that's more human readable. I'm going to write it here. So functions begin with the word function. You want to do some sort of recognizable name. We're going to have something that gets passed to it. That's what we put in the brackets right there. And then we close brackets, open brackets for it. So we are going to go GB size equals size divided by 1024, 1024, 1024, semicolon. And we are going to return GB size to whoever called it. That seems pretty cool. We can inline use this to convert things as we're going through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert it in our system.log to convert to GB, open bracket, close that. Wait for a second, make sure it validates. See how it was red before, but now it's validated. And let's try running this and see if it works. Now we have the size of my name of my data stores and the size in easy to read gigabytes per second. This opens up the last thing that I want to illustrate as we're going through this. You have to get used to being able to explore the API and getting comfortable with it, but it's going to teach you a lot about how vCenter works and ESXi works. I learned a lot more about it when I started exploring this API. It's really an excellent way to learn the product and the solution. The last thing I want to talk about is how we can assign information into outputs or inputs. So I'm going to create an output. I'm going to call it data store name, and I'm going to make it an array of string. So it's going to have a string that potentially has multiple inputs in it. Now we're going to go back here to my scriptable task. We are going to select and insert the scriptable task here. And we know that we have an output. We're going to add the output that I just created, data store name, into here. We are going to take the new variable and we are going to add it to our scriptable task, so we can pass that to a new scriptable task. So now that we can click here, we can see that it's an output that's listed, data store name, and that it's parameter and it's expecting an array of strings. First thing we need to do is we need to define that array. Notice I'm defining it as new array. Also notice the case sensitivity that's included there. That's kind of important on the word array. And then we're going to go through each iteration and we are going to push the name of the data store into the array of data store dot name. Let's go ahead and we're going to make a quick comment here. // to comment out that line. So our expected output from this is that it shouldn't produce anything to screen. So we'll go ahead and run it and see. Let it run through. Notice now I have data store name as an array string with some values in it. If I click the question mark, I can see it has two elements with those names. So it worked exactly like I expected it to. Now you can begin to see the real power of vRealize Orchestrator. We could take the data that we gather from that, run it through other loops to massage the data to get the information we need, send that back to vRealize automation, or email it out as a report, or use it with some other third-party plugin to insert the information. For example, we could take all the data store names as well as their capacity and insert that into our CMDB using a REST API plugin. That's the real power of Orchestrator, is to pull the data from various sources, massage it as needed, and then insert it in destination locations. I hope this has been helpful, and thanks for watching.